There will be fewer and fewer jobs that a robot cannot do better.
Okay.
What to do about mass unemployment? This is going to be a massive social challenge. And I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Universal basic income.
Universal basic income. I think it's going to be necessary.
So it means that unemployed people will be paid across the globe.
Yeah.
Because there is no job, machine, robot is taking over.
That's simply and I want to be clear that these are not things that I think that I wish would happen. These are simply things that I think probably will happen. And if my assessment is correct and they probably will happen, then we need to say, what are we going to do about it? And I think some kind of a universal basic income is going to be necessary. Now, the output of goods and services will be extremely high. So with automation, there will come abundance. There will be almost everything will get very cheap. I think I think we'll just end up doing a universal basic income. It's going to be necessary. The harder challenge, much harder challenge, is how do people then have meaning? Like a lot of people, they derive their meaning from their employment. So if you don't have, if you're not needed, if there's not a need for your labor, how do you, what's the meaning? Do you have meaning? Do you feel useless? That's a much harder problem to deal with.
How do you feel about universal basic income? Because that's a subject that comes up a lot lately. When Elon Musk is talking about these driverless cars, one of the things he's saying is that one thing that we're going to need is universal basic income. He said we're going to have to figure out some way to feed all these people that are going to get taken out of the job market because their jobs have become irrelevant.
So I think that universal basic income is for when the technology gets so good that there legitimately are no jobs. I don't think that we're there yet. So if you have a machine that can make everything basically for free, and then there's a bunch of people who you don't need anymore to do work, then you can talk about a universal basic income because there's no scarcity. Scarcity is what creates a need for labor. So if there's scarcity in any industry, then there's going to be a need for labor. There's going to be need for new labor. People are going to still have to work on these trucks and deal with technology. And the computer industry didn't destroy jobs all over the United States when typewriters went out. So I think it's a little premature. I'm not sure there will ever be a day when there's a machine when the machine society is so well developed that it can take over all jobs. I do think you're seeing a bifurcation in the labor market. So I think people who are in jobs like yours and mine, like we're lucky. This is a creative job. It's hard for machines to create, but for jobs that are single task jobs, a lot more of those are going to be technologically driven. And so people are going to have to, work the right side of their brain a little bit. We're going to have to train people in a different way. But my perspective on universal basic income is when you have a 4% unemployment rate, it's very difficult to say you need a universal basic income. Like it's, again, 96% of people in the labor market who can work are working. So that's not suggesting to me that there's this vast underclass of people who are totally incapable of working. And once you do that, you see what you've seen actually with the disability programs in the United States, right? Where now everybody's on disability. Like the fastest growing government program in America is the disability program, where people declare themselves disabled so that they can get government pensions, basically. Once you have universal basic income, is there an incentive to work? And also, I'm not sure that you've solved a lot of people's problems. Like people still need something to do with their day.
Yeah, but the idea
how many
is
60-year-olds do you see who retire and they're dead within 3 years?
The utopian idea is that somehow or another you're going to open up these people's inherent creativity and they'll find something they actually enjoy.
Yeah, that's a bunch of hooey. I mean, how many people say, again.
I love that you said hooey. What are you, like 32? How old are you, man?
I'm 33, yeah.
When you're 33 and you're using the term hooey.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's, again, I hope I never retire because I just know too many people who retire and I'm going to retire and I'm going to golf and I'm going to paint. I'm going to create.
Just die.
And 6 months later, they're dead.
They're dead, yeah. Well, people enjoy doing things and feeling like they're valuable, and I don't know if that necessarily has to be a job, but it's a very clear, definitive test of whether or not you're valuable. If somebody gives you money and you get that money and you're like, look, I'm valuable, I'm doing something, I'm contributing, I got a check for my week's work.
Exactly. There's a lot of hours in the day, and it's going to be hard to fill that with watercolor painting and beat poetry classes.
I don't know, man. I'd find shit to do, but I've been fairly self-employed most of my life.
Yeah, I think
I've gotten into
some people are driven. Like I would find stuff to do too,
Yeah.
but there is a difference in, not all human beings are the people who would actually go out and take classes and find things to do.
In it, for sure.
Well, what are your thoughts on universal basic income? Because bring it back to that with this rise of the machines. If we do have things automated, I mean, some ridiculous number of people make their living driving cars and driving trucks. Now, when those jobs are gone, I think it's millions of people, right?
Yeah,
Isn't it?
no, and I think it is in the States, it's the most common job for white men. I think it's something like 9 million white men are driving trucks and cars. I mean,
The problem with that is most people are like, fuck white men.
Yeah, well,
Tired of white men. We're the patriarchy.
This is Trump's base.
Yeah.
No, it's these. I think universal basic income. There are reasons to worry that it's not a perfect solution, because you want to incentivize the things you want to incentivize. You need to just understand the consequences of any system you would put in place. But there's just no question that viewed as an opportunity, this is the greatest opportunity in human history. We're talking about canceling the need for dangerous, boring, repetitive work and freeing up humanity to do interesting, creative, fun things. Now, how could that be bad? Well, give us a little time and we'll show you how we can make it bad. But it'll be bad if it leads to just, extraordinary wealth inequality that we don't have the political or ethical will to fix. And because if we have a culture of people who think, I don't want any handouts, and I certainly don't want my neighbor to get any handouts, and I don't want to pay any taxes so that he can be a lazy bum. If we have this, hangover from Calvinism, that makes it impossible to talk creatively and reasonably about what has changed, it could be a very painful bottleneck we have to pass through until we get to something that is much better or a hell of a lot worse, depending on where the technology goes. And I think at a certain point, the wealth inequality will be obviously unsustainable. I mean, you can't have multiple trillionaires walking around, living in compounds with razor wire, and just moving everywhere by private jet, and then massive levels of unemployment in a society like ours. I mean, at a certain point, the richest people will realize that enough is enough. We have to spread this wealth, because otherwise people are just going to show up at our compounds with their AR-15s or their pitchforks, and the society will not sustain it. I mean, there has to be some level of wealth inequality that is unsustainable, that people will not tolerate. And you begin to look more and more like a banana republic until you become a banana republic. But now we're talking about, the U.S. or the developed world where all the wealth is. So redistribution is the end game. But that's a toxic concept for half of the country right now.
Right, the idea of the welfare state, the idea of perpetuating that and spreading it across the board.
Yeah, but these are...
Here. What's your take on universal income? Is it a fast track to new communism, capitalism killer, or a possible way out of starvation for humanity? Thank you.
Well, I don't think it addresses the fundamental problem. And I think it's a mirror of the rights responsibility problem. You might say, well, everyone has a right to the basics of life. And first of all, that's a debatable proposition, because the question is, who's going to provide those necessities? And the answer shouldn't be someone else under compulsion. Because each right comes at the expense of someone else's responsibility. And so you don't want to multiply rights beyond minimum necessity, because you also multiply diverse responsibilities beyond tolerance. But more importantly than that, I would say, is that let's make it more concrete. So let's imagine that as the technological revolution progresses, more and more people will be in danger of being replaced by intelligent machines. Now, we don't know if that's true because it hasn't happened yet, right? And everyone has been predicting that that was going to happen since like 1960, and it hasn't happened. And so there may be an infinite amount of work, and we're never going to run out of work. I suspect that's probably the case. But let's assume that people do get dispossessed as technologies transform, and then we have the problem of the development of people who have no viable means of making a living. And the question might be, well, what's the fundamental problem there? And one answer is, well, they don't have any money. But I actually don't think that that is the fundamental problem. I've had many people in my clinical practice who were unemployed and had money. Now, they didn't have a lot of money, but they had enough money. And enough money to keep privation at bay, let's say, and enough money to, well, that was the rub. Enough money to get themselves into plenty of trouble. And so one of my clients, for example, was I liked him quite a lot, and he had worked in a hospital, and he'd been hurt, and then he got onto painkillers because he'd been hurt, and then he got addicted to painkillers, and then he got addicted to cocaine, and his life took a bad nosedive. And he was actually pretty good unless he had money. But as soon as he had a check, he was gone. He was in a ditch. He was in a bar. He spent all his money, and he was face down in a ditch, and that's where he woke up the next day. And the reason I'm telling you that story is because it wasn't that he didn't have money. That wasn't the problem, really. The problem was that he didn't have a purpose. He didn't have a place anymore. He got thrown out of the structure that would have enabled him to find productive meaning. You know, and you might have said, well, he should have been able to conjure that up on his own, and perhaps that's the case, although he wasn't the world's most sophisticated person. You know, and people vary substantially in their sophistication, and he didn't have a good family. He didn't have a support network around him. He was kind of a lost character in many, many ways. And so it was easy for him to fall out of the world, which is what he did. And providing him with money was not going to fix that. And so that's what people need. They need a differentiated and delineated purpose. It's way more important than the money. It isn't money that you need. I know you need money, for God's sake. I'm not ignorant. Everybody needs money. That's not the point here. It's the provision of money without purpose is not helpful. And what people need is a purpose. And they need that to develop that for themselves, obviously, because it's something you have to participate in, but it's something that society has to foster. And the reason they need that purpose is because that's what gives their life meaning. Think about this. Do you really think that you would be satisfied if you had money without responsibility? So what? Okay, got no responsibility. Because that's what everyone wants. It's like, I had a client, he wanted to retire when he was kind of young. And I said, well, what's your retirement dream? He said, well, I envision myself on a beach in a tropical island with a margarita in my hand. And I thought, what the hell is that? It's like, okay, let's play that out. Let's be adult about this. Okay, so you go down to, you're this like red-headed white guy. You go down to the Caribbean, and you sit on a beach, and you're sitting on the beach, and you have like 6 margaritas, and you're there for like 3 hours. What happens the next day? Okay, you're sunburnt to a crisp, right? So you can't even go out of your hotel room, and you're hungover. Okay, and let's say now you hide in your hotel room for 3 or 4 days, and you recover, and then you repeat that every day for 3 months. It's like, you go outside and all the locals get away from you because you're the new drunk lecher who's come down from the north. And that's your vision for retirement. It's like, okay, so you have all the money you want, no responsibility. You don't have to take care of yourself. You don't have a partner, so you don't have to take care of them. You don't have any kids. You don't have to take care of them. You don't have a job. It's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do exactly? Sit in the sun and drink margaritas. It's like, there's no, that's not a good vision. You don't want no responsibility. It's wrong. People find the meaning in their life by adopting responsibility. And so, provision of money, you know, they say man does not live by bread alone. And there's wisdom in that. It's like you don't want no responsibility. You might dream about that if you're crushed by your job. But then you have the wrong job, or you have the wrong attitude, or you have the wrong job and the wrong attitude. I don't know what it is. You want lots of responsibility, and society needs to foster that, and we need to help people find their purpose and their place. And that's more to the point than universal income. It's the wrong solution.